anywhere. Morning Joe starts right now.
If we could just go over some of the numbers, I think it's pretty clear that we won. We won very substantially, Georgia.
The reason I'm having to stand here today is because there are people in positions of authority and respect who have said their votes didn't count, and it's not true.
They are shredding ballots, in my opinion, based on what I've heard.
There is no shredding of ballots going on. That's not real. It's not happening.
Brad, why did they put the votes in 3 times? You know, they put them in 3 times.
But there was no problem with the machine scanning. If somebody took a stack of ballots and scanned them multiple times, you would have a lot of votes with no corresponding ballots.
It was stuffed with votes. They weren't in an official voter box. They were in what looked to be suitcases, or trunks, suitcases, but they weren't in voter boxes.
There is videotape of this, and this is what's really frustrating. The president's legal team had the entire tape. They watched the entire tape, and then, from our point of view, intentionally misled the state senate, voters, and the people of the United States about this. When I listened to the audio of the phone call, and the president brought that up again, and I heard it on a radio ad again today, I wanted to scream.
But have they moved? Have they moved the inner parts of the machines and replaced them with other parts?
No.
You sure, Ryan?
I'm sure, Mr. President.
Let's see. This is what I don't fully understand. No one is changing parts or pieces out of Dominion voting machines. That's not a real. I don't even know what that means.
Right. Top Georgia election official Gabriel Sterling with that reality check yesterday for President Trump. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Tuesday, January 5th. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, former U.S. Senator, now on NBC News and MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill, and co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim Vandehei. It was painful to watch, but had to be done by these Georgia election officials, Joe. Republicans who seem to be able to stand up to Trump in a way that many others have not, to his face and to the cameras.
Well, the thing is, they're Republicans, lifelong Republicans. They support Donald Trump. They've supported Donald Trump, and they've been elected as.
But they also support facts.
As officials, Donald Trump, and we are actually starting to see a split finally in the Republican Party between those who are willing to actually work to engage in the president's attempt at sedition against the United States of America and undermining American democracy. And those Republicans, some in the Senate who would go up to the line but pull back at the last second, decided that maybe, just maybe, sedition and treason against the United States may not be a good way to finish out the term. But Willie, the president's claims are beyond outrageous. He picked them up from the sewers of the internet, and he passes them off as fact when Josh Hawley knows that they're lies. Ted Cruz knows that they're lies. Ron Johnson, you know, to be honest with you, Ron Johnson sometimes doesn't know the difference between a microwave and a blender and his lawnmower. So I don't think we even need to go into Ron Johnson. He gets confused easily. But most of those people know, all of them know, Donald Trump is lying. Donald Trump knows he's lying.
They're lying.
And yet they are going to conduct a vote tomorrow where they're going to commit treason against the United States of America, sedition against the United States of America, trying to hold up and some overturn the popular will of how many people voted? 150 million Americans? It's like nothing, obviously, that we've ever seen in this country since the Civil War.
Yeah, I mean, those were the faces right there, and it'll happen tomorrow, the day after this Georgia
Can we
Senate
put
election.
those faces up again, by the way? Can we put those faces up again? Because these are the people who are voting to help the president's attempt to commit treason against the United States of America. Take a good long look at them. I'm sorry, Willie, go ahead.
No, and last night, President Trump, in his appearance in Georgia on the eve of this election that will determine control of the United States Senate, is recruiting publicly Mike Pence, his own vice president, saying, we hope he comes through on Wednesday. Now, Mike Pence has a ceremonial role when this electoral college vote takes place officially in the United States Senate and in the Congress on Wednesday. But Donald Trump is recruiting him and asking him to do something more. He views him as a judge at a trial, which is not how this works at all. But now you have those senators, the President of the United States and the Vice President, all working together on this effort. It will fail. We know that because we know how this system works, but they are going out in a failed attempt, and they know it's going to fail. They are sticking their necks out to participate in what you describe as sedition, and it's hard to describe it any other way. You had
to appease a crazy man.
To appease the president, who, as you just said, Joe, he is plucking those theories. We're going to hear more from our reporter Ben Collins in a minute from QAnon.
Sedition.
And as he describes them, it's clear he doesn't even quite understand them. He's throwing terms out and theories out. And very patiently, the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, and his attorney on that call are just saying, no, Mr. President, no, sir, that didn't happen. You can see the frustration from Gabe Sterling, the elections official that we heard from coming into the show, point by point, refuting this in a state where the vote, Joe, has been counted 3 times. 3 times in the state of Georgia, the vote has been counted. And President Trump at his rally last night asking people to go vote for 2 Republicans in a place where he claims the vote was rigged previously. Wow.
And he also claims, or at least one of his lawyers claimed, that Kelly Loeffler was part of a conspiracy theory to rig the runoffs.
Yeah.
To keep Doug Collins out. The president even hinted at that in the tweet earlier. But Claire McCaskill, I'm just wondering, I don't think been in public life since 1993 when I first started campaigning. I don't think in, God, all that time, I don't think I've ever, over a quarter of a century, ever said a politician was guilty of sedition or treason. I know that conservatives have always done that. I don't think I'm one of them. I had there's a big 1960s book that conspiracy theorists on the right love called None Dare Call It Treason. I'm just curious. You're an attorney. You're a prosecutor, former prosecutor. You're a senator. Is it too harsh to accuse the president of the United States and those who are conspiring with him right now of committing sedition against the United States of America, or committing treason against the United States of America? Because you look at the federal statute. I mean, look at Michelle Goldberg. She starts her column with a federal statute this morning, and just look at the federal statute. It sure looks like this president is guilty of something, and it sure seems like sedition to me.
I think, Joe, that we are so worn down by the behavior of this guy and his lies. I mean, think what he has done. He started lying early and often, and his supporters looked the other way and became numb to it. And frankly, all of us became somewhat numb to how often and how robust his lies were. So he's taken that strategy and he's applied it to this election. He started lying about the security of this election months ago. So now, because some of his followers believe these lies, that is the little flimsy excuse, which I believe is seditious, for these elected senators to ignore the Constitution. And you went through the list. I will tell you, not only do the majority of these senators know better, not only do they know that this is a total stunt on his part, the other thing that's interesting about it to me is the schism this is causing within the Republican Party in the Senate. I've talked to a lot of senators over the last week, and I'll just tell you what is really interesting is senior senators from a lot of these guys' states are voting in favor of the Constitution. They're going to perform their ministerial duty. They know they have no power to overturn the states. They know that what these guys are doing is not conservative. It's radical. It's extreme. It's anything but being a constitutional conservative. So you see splits within delegations for the majority of these states. And that is really unusual because usually 2 Republican senators from a state kind of talk to each other and go the same way, especially if the senior senator is explaining that this is a dumb move. They're ignoring that advice from senior senators in these states.
And you know, Mika, I've been describing for 4 years, actually for 5 years, during the campaign, I said Donald Trump is no conservative,
Right.
not even close.
Democrat.
And I've been describing for the past 4 years how these Republicans are not conservative, how they are trashing constitutional norms, how they remain quiet while the president claims ultimate power under Article 2 of the Constitution. They remain quiet while the president racks up the biggest deficit, the biggest federal debt of all time, spends like a drunken socialist, out of control. Nothing conservative about this guy. And now, in one of their final acts as members of the United States Senate, you're going to have self-proclaimed conservatives who, again, aren't conservative, they're radical. They're going to actually vote to have the federal government, to have the centralized state sweep in and override the decision of voters, override a local and state election officials, to do actually just the opposite of what we conservatives have always said we're for, which is deferring, having the federal government do what the federal government has to do, but deferring to the state, especially where the Constitution suggests that we defer to the states. And elections are to be handled by state legislatures, and then we have the states certify the process. And then it goes to Washington. You have Josh Hawley going, oh, no, it doesn't matter what the state legislators say. It doesn't matter what the local election officials say. It doesn't matter what the voters say. We in the centralized state are going to override the wisdom of their vote, the wisdom of the state legislators, the wisdom of the state election officials, and yes, the wisdom of our founders, who said elections were to be regulated on the state level. But Josh Hawley is now going to sweep in and say, screw the Constitution, screw the state legislators, screw the voters. We in the centralized state are going to determine what the law is. We're going to determine what the law is because one person who's in the White House is telling us to do this. It is the most anti-democratic thing any of us have seen since the Civil War. Josh Hawley, you're in the middle of it. Ted Cruz, you're in the middle of it. And all those other idiots are in the middle of it, who, a lot of idiots with Ivy League degrees, by the way. A lot of idiots with Ivy League degrees. I don't know if they can strip them of their degrees or not. I'm just a state school guy, but I can read the black and white lettering of the United States Constitution and know these people are useful idiots for a tyrant in training.
And you can see a crime when it's being committed.
Yeah, exactly.
By the person that you're doing this
they
for.
Can too. They can.
That's where I don't understand the thinking.
They went to Harvard and Yale Law School. They can read the Constitution. They know what they're doing.
Well, as we've mentioned, while the president's rally in Georgia last night was intended to...
To me, it's the difference between first-degree murder versus premeditated murder. This is all being premeditated by various people that's going along with this. And because of it, it puts it in a different category pertaining to the guilt, the punishment of the crime that should be issued out in regards to this, but I'm still not hearing or seeing proper results in this regard. So for this to continue to go on, kind of like an abscess sore, if you pick at it and pick at it and pick at it, rather than healing, it actually gets worse. And I'm kind of seeing this as a civilian watching this unfold right in front of our very eyes. And I realize what they're saying as far as the population by and large becoming callous to this, because it's almost like it's almost like a reality show that you know what to expect out of Donald Trump's mouth and out of Donald Trump's administration, but whenever it starts growing, the cancer starts growing into what we're seeing, then it's whenever alarm bells should start going off and red lights and red flags should start being raised, because now it's affecting not just Donald Trump and Donald Trump's administration, but now it's affecting all of us. And whenever it turns to the worse, even I have said that if it's broke, fix it. And it's obvious that the system has been broken. I just don't know how to go about fixing it just yet. There's no doubt people need to get their hearts and their lives right with God. That's my primary purpose for me being here, towards being a spiritual advisor, a spiritual messenger. I really hate to even dibble-dabble around in their politics towards what's wrong, what's right, what's superficial, what's considered popular, what's considered unpopular, because I'm not called to be a politician. Regardless whether it's a politician here in America or a politician wherever, I'm not called to be a politician. I'm called to be a spiritual advisor towards preparing people for the inedible, which is the death of this world to the life of the world to come. That's what I'm called to do. To give people hope that through the blood of Christ, we all have a promise through the Heavenly Father that whosoever believeth in the Lamb of God, in the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ, shall not perish but have everlasting life. That's what my primary purpose is. And I hate to embark upon to these Homo sapiens political affairs down here, because obviously they're twisted, they're mangled, they're messed up, they're tainted, they're greedy, they're selfish, their minds have been branded or fizzled with a hot iron, to the point that they really don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. I hate to even talk this way, but it's very upsetting whenever you see how the cancer is still spreading, and you got people like this that tells you that it's spreading, but you see the results on the other end towards them. Instead of being part of the solution to the problem, they're actually part of the problem. Why would you allow for somebody to rev up the people like this? Are you purposely wanting a civil war? Are you purposely wanting bloodshed? I mean, to me, it's senseless, because we wasn't willing to go to war with the right bunch of people that attacked us during 9/11. That was a big diversion, a play game put on by the American government, because we was already too embedded with the Saudi American government, even though bin Laden come from Saudi Arabia. And we know for a fact that like 14 of the hijackers out of 19 come from Saudi Arabia. Why would a country be willing to go to war with itself, but wasn't willing to go to war with the people that stirred this all up to begin with? That's the part that I can't fathom. That if you're wanting to go to war for the right principles. Go to war with the right enemy. Go to war with the right adversary that's trying to bring you down and trying to destroy you. This has got to be the most craziest thing that I've ever thought of. I don't think it could be thought of. I don't think that there's nobody in Hollywood that could have sat down and thought all this out to the degree of the way that it's unfolding, that there's nobody in Hollywood could have sat down and scripted this out before it actually occurred.
For the Senate candidates,
Unbelievable.
He spent much of his time railing against his own failed bid for re-election. At one point, the president put the pressure on Vice President Mike Pence, zeroing in on the role that Pence will play overseeing tomorrow's certification of the Electoral College vote count.
I hope Mike Pence comes through for us, I have to tell you. I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much.
Tomorrow, Pence will preside over the proceedings as Congress votes on the Electoral College results. It's a role that is largely ceremonial. Pence does not have unilateral power to affect the outcome of those proceedings, but Trump, as you can see, is pressuring him to do some dramatic act going against
Donald Trump doesn't understand the Constitution. He doesn't want to understand.
Well, he also thinks the people around him are that stupid, and many are. Many are that stupid. They do what they think that he says they should do instead of what is right. So why not push the envelope is what Trump is thinking. And the people around him are the bigger idiots because they know better. As the New York Times puts it, Pence's role will be more akin to the presenter opening the Academy Award envelope or reading the name of the movie that won Best Picture with no say in determining the winner. It may be worth noting that on the campaign trail in Georgia yesterday, Pence did not engage when the crowd began chanting, "Stop the steal." Peter Baker, you're following all of this. What are the chances Mike Pence would do something that crazy for Donald Trump? My gut is no.
Well, it's hard to say. I don't know what he could do. I mean, I honestly don't know what they see as the genuine options. The Department of Justice has already said that, this Louis Gohmert lawsuit trying to preemptively order Pence in effect to take action was out of bounds. He doesn't really have a role. His role is to open up the box, hand the piece of paper to the senators who will be the tellers that we will read the results out loud. And that's it. And then, Josh Hawley and the Republicans in the House can object. And if they get one member of the Senate and one member of the House to object to a state's electors, then they'll go their separate ways in their separate chambers and have 2 hours of debate, and they'll vote. And these votes are predetermined. We know these votes are going to be. Obviously, the Democratic House is not going to agree to unseat electors for Joe Biden. Obviously, we've now seen more than enough Republican senators say they wouldn't vote to do that either, that we know there's a majority in the Senate as well. So we're going to go through a kabuki dance tomorrow, but one that obviously has great import because it's the first time I think we've ever seen in our history a sitting president of the United States lose an election and yet try to hang on to power even after the Electoral College has voted through a series of false claims and increasingly desperate efforts to pressure anybody in the system to allow him to stay in office despite the will of the people.
Jim Vandehei, this appears to be the extreme extension of the old doctrine that the president put out years ago, that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and everybody would stay with him. Now he's trying to overturn a presidential election. He's trying to subvert democracy and push and push and push and say, how far will these people go with me? Well, he's got a group of United States senators and perhaps the vice president of the United States and tens of millions of his supporters who've said, sure, I'll go along for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, Peter has a great piece in the New York Times today looking at sort of the historical anomaly. This has never happened before, and people need to realize that. Then you have to ask, well, why is it that when you get to the vote that Peter just laid out, why is it that probably more than half in total of elected Republicans are going to vote to overturn the election or try to overturn the election? It's not just Trump. When you get outside of Washington, almost every voter you talk to, Republican voter, is with Donald Trump, probably because of Donald Trump. They firmly seem to believe, based on the reporting, based on talking to them, based on the inbox in terms of like people who are emailing on a daily basis, they seem to really believe it. And there's nothing you can write, nothing you can say that seems to change their mind. Joe pointed out earlier, this isn't a bunch of woke lefties that are doing this to Donald Trump. These are some of the Trumpiest Trumps out there. Tom Cotton, you're trying to tell me that he's not a Trump guy? Until yesterday, you would have said he's one of the most Trumpy Republicans out there. The governor of Georgia, handpicked by Donald Trump. If we were having this debate 2 weeks ago, you would have said he's in the top 5 Republicans who are closest to Donald Trump and most like Donald Trump. So it's not just the media. It's not just the lefties. It is all these Republicans who are close to him, and yet it doesn't seem to be moving the needle with his supporters, which is why these 2024 Republicans are making the calculation that this will work in their advantage.
Yeah, and let's expand on that for a second. So if this is a deep state conspiracy, my God, it's deep. How deep is your love? How deep is this deep state conspiracy? Bill Barr's in this deep state conspiracy. Amy Coney Barrett, she's in the deep state conspiracy too, if you believe this nonsense. Tom Cotton, also in the deep state conspiracy, if you believe this nonsense. Every federal judge Trump appointed that his and Mitch McConnell Senate approved. The reason why you gave up your religion, the reason why you gave up your values, the reason why you put your evangelical faith in a blind trust over the past 4 years in exchange for 30 pieces of silver and some federal judges. I hope you're spending the 30 pieces of silver because those federal judges that you actually lost your religion for, that you sacrificed your faith for, they're all in the deep state conspiracy too. Because they're all voting against Donald Trump's attempt to overturn an election. So, are you really that stupid? I don't think you're that stupid. I really don't think you. I think you maybe you go on Facebook and maybe you go on other pages because it makes you feel good. It reinforces what you believe, but you know deep in your heart that he's wrong. You know deep in your heart he's a liar. You know deep in your heart he's not conservative. He's a cancer on the conservative movement. He's a cancer on the Republican Party. He's tearing it to shreds right now. I warned you. 5 years. It's happening. He's tearing the Republican Party apart. You think I'm happy about that? You think I want the left wing of the Democratic Party to take over Washington, D.C.? Well, if you do, you're a fool. You're an idiot, and you haven't listened to anything I've been telling you for the past 5 years. Because we've gotten to the place where conservatives and the never-Trumpers and I have warned you we were going to get to. And now look what's happening. But you're still believing Donald Trump. You're still believing a guy who contributed to Hillary Clinton 9 times. You're still believing a guy who contributed to Kamala Harris in 2014. You're still believing a guy who gave one check after another to Charlie Rangel. You're still believing a guy who gave political contributions to Anthony Weiner. You're still believing a guy that gave political contributions to Elliot Spitzer. Really? That's your definition of conservative, and that's why you were willing to lose your religion for Donald Trump? That's why you were willing to sell out conservatism for Donald Trump? That's why you were willing to watch the Republican Party destroy itself for Donald Trump? Wake up. It's almost midnight, Cinderella. And things are about to get ugly if you don't pull away from this failed reality TV host. Peter Baker, we get numbed by what we see day in and day out. over the past 4 or 5 years. Your article does talk about how extraordinary this moment in time is. Can you explain to our viewers just what a break from history this is and how this has never happened before, that we haven't seen a split like this since the Civil War in 1861?
Yeah, I think it is important to pull back every once in a while. I think because we have gotten, as you say, so numb to the mishigas that comes with this presidency over the last 4 years, we've sort of lost touch of just how unusual it really is, right? So 220 years ago in 1800, John Adams, the second president of the United States, loses to Thomas Jefferson, and he turns over power, and in doing so creates the precedent for a bedrock principle of American democracy that has held ever since. And we've never seen since then a sitting president, not one time a sitting president who lost the election try to do what Donald Trump is doing. Now, we've had disputed elections, certainly. 1876 is usually thought of as the worst one. There was, of course, a fight over the 2000 election. Neither of those and the other ones that were argued about involved a sitting president trying to use the power of his office to somehow subvert the will of the voters, right? What you heard the president do with Brad Raffensperger wasn't just say, hey, I won an honest election. What he said is, I want you to find me the votes so that I win. And he said, he even dangled the idea that there might be a criminal exposure for a Republican official in Georgia if he didn't follow suit. He used the word criminal 9-10 times in the course of that hour-long conversation. Now, I don't know whether that's illegal or not. That's for lawyers to describe, but it certainly sounds like an extraordinary application of pressure by the person who has already shown that he's willing to use the Justice Department to serve his political interests. And I think that, we don't see that in American history. This is so different and so out of the norm that it's worth stopping every once in a while to say, wait a second, this is not how America has worked, at least not in our lifetime.
No, and if you know President Trump's patterns and also his obsession with big reveals on his reality shows and whatever else he's done in the past, pageants, whatever, Willie, I'm sorry, it is, in my opinion, very possible, knowing the nature of his personality, that he actually thinks Mike Pence would do some reveal when he opens the envelope or passes it along that proclaims him the president of the United States. And that's what he's counting on from Mike Pence. And so I asked Peter Baker, who so innocently is trying to stick to things that are normal, like the Constitution and history and everything this country has been built on and every process that we have stuck to ever since. The president's working outside the norms. And I'm telling you, the guy thinks Mike Pence is going to have like a special secret envelope with his name in it. He's delusional.
I don't think there's any question about that. He's been saying that privately, pushing Mike Pence, according to our reporting, according to reporting in the New York Times, saying, figure something out, do something. And then last night, he threw it out into the open at that rally in Georgia and said, Mike Pence better come through for us or else I'm not going to like him so much. Let's go to Georgia. The Secretary of State there, that phone call that we were just discussing in which President Trump urged the Secretary of State to, quote, find votes. During the call, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger tried to warn the president not to rely on internet conspiracies.
Mr. President, the problem you have with social media, people can say...
No, this isn't social media. This is Trump media. It's not social media. It's really not. It's not social media. I don't care about social.
Let's bring in NBC News reporter Ben Collins. Ben, good morning. It's good to see you. So you cover this stuff. You cover QAnon. You find yourself in the darkest corners of the internet. That's how you make your living. What did you think as you listened to the more than 1 hour phone call between President Trump and Brad Raffensperger as President Trump sort of stumbled his way through these basic QAnon conspiracy theories?
I was startled by his knowledge and grasp of really specific conspiracy theories that didn't even make it out of the QAnon internet. They didn't make it to the civilian internet where most people live. They barely made it to Facebook rumor level stuff. For example, the president targets this woman named Ruby Freeman, who is an election worker. She's a black woman. And 4chan specifically, which is an extremist website, by the way, specifically said this woman was rigging the election using suitcases. This is an elaborate conspiracy theory. And the president specifically targeted this one hashtag called Where's Ruby. If you do the analytics on this hashtag, this was exclusively QAnon hashtag. Only a few hundred people retweeted this thing, and it was pretty much all QAnon accounts. Who is Ruby Freeman really? She's a woman who sells purses on Instagram and has a kiosk at the mall. She is not this elaborate scammer, which is what the president called her. And it's almost like confounding that this person has this information coming to him through this pipeline. QAnon was built on the idea that, the Democratic Party is run by Satanists, child eaters, and all this nonsense. That fell apart because, there were several deadlines that were passed. It's like a cult where they have hard deadlines of, the rapture, and it comes and goes. So what happened instead? That network of people on Twitter and Facebook and in blogs, they have spent the last 2 months finding these ridiculous ways the president can remain in office despite losing the election.
So, Ben, you mentioned a pipeline from QAnon, from these cesspools of the internet to the president of the United States. How are they making their way to the president? How are they making their way to the Oval Office that he can become so fluent in them?
Yeah, it's mostly just those QAnon network factions on Twitter. They kind of come together. They build up these big retweets. And by the way, Mika was right. She said this thing about how she's expecting this big reveal. The president wants this big reveal to happen. There was a hashtag in QAnon Twitter called the Pence card. They think there's going to be a literal, card that he can play where Mike Pence goes up there on Wednesday and says, hey, guess what? Donald Trump is still the president of the United States. This is just bonkers stuff from the very fringe corners of the internet. And they work together to push these things up. Mostly it comes through this guy named Ron Watkins. Ron Watkins runs the website 8chan. It used to be called 8chan. That's the website last year where all those white nationalists were posting their manifestos before they went and killed people. They had to rebrand. Ron Watkins has since turned into some sort of like election expert. He's on OAN saying he knows all these things about voting machines. He has no experience in voting machines. The president retweets this guy constantly, retweets his segments constantly. He might be Q from QAnon. He runs the website that QAnon posts on, right? So that's where all of this is coming from. This is raw QAnon, just sort of like they're shifting their talking points from the Democratic cabal, and they're changing it to be about the president remaining in office.
It's amazing, Claire McCaskill, isn't it, that this stuff that you probably used to see in emails and strange letters your office might get has now risen to the Oval Office.
Yeah, in fact, I remember laughing.
The comment strips. This is stuff like you see on your aisle 3 before you get to the grocery line to pay for your groceries. This is stuff that's made up in fairy tales. Okay? And now it's in the White House. These are people's lives. You got people that are dying and suffering right here in America, all over the country. And to think that a bunch of grown individuals is going to get up in front of a bunch of cameras and act this way for the will of the people? This goes beyond being unprofessional. This is appalling. It's disgraceful, and it shouldn't be allowed to be carried on center stage. But, who am I? I didn't think it was right the way that they tried to glorify what happened with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. They tried to glamorify that on TV. They've tried to glamorify other things that I didn't feel like should have been glamorified. It should have been looked upon as being disgraceful and sinful. Who am I? I'm just one person trying to tell people about certain things that I know is coming down the pike if we don't act a certain way. And I'm still steadily being ignored. I'm still steadily being treated as if I'm a nincompoop. But yet all the things that I keep telling people are going to occur are actually occurring. So when is the people going to wake up? I don't know. I don't know. They're in this spell binding atmosphere right now that obviously even the pandemic isn't shaking them into reality. It's sad. It's really, really sad of how a bunch of grown people working for the will of the people will get up and tell lie after lie after lie in regards to what's happening right now.
About Comet Pizza when it first came out and how funny it was. Well, it's not funny anymore. And Ben, I'm curious, you have the, I think, odious task of prowling around these sites and learning about these people. A two-part question. One, what are you seeing about what they're planning on the ground Wednesday, tomorrow in DC? And secondly, what is your sense about infiltration by foreign agents that see this as an incredible leverage to make us look silly on the world stage and to tear apart our democracy from the inside?
Sure, I'll answer your second one first. QAnon is a very American phenomenon. If it wasn't started by an American, it would be a shock to most people. That doesn't mean foreign actors aren't using it to push their narratives and split people apart. It's sort of the perfect fodder for a foreign influence campaign. And, we've seen from Facebook reports and Twitter reports who have taken down foreign influence campaigns that they've used QAnon hashtags constantly because it's a good network of people to get riled up. You want to get people who are already sort of near the fringe and push them over the edge. That's the point of foreign influence campaigns. Now, speaking of pushing people over the edge, Wednesday, that's the scary thing that we're all worried about. How many of these people are being driven to real life action from what they're reading on Facebook and Twitter and from what the president is putting out into those parts of the internet? I think we're going to find out. This is something they've been planning on this for about a month, and lots of different militias and even Facebook groups are coming together and saying, let's all come together to show our support for the president. But a lot of them are saying, let's come armed, let's come ready. That's the big fear here, is that it's not just going to be a bunch of Proud Boys prowling the streets. It's going to be a bunch of Proud Boys who are intermingled with random fans of the president and people who are coming out to counter-protest. And that's how you get trouble, is when you get a cocktail of people who all believe that something is amiss and they can't do anything about it. That's where the worry is. Like, what's the next step for those people when their savior doesn't remain in office anymore?
Yeah, and the president, as you say, is encouraging them to come to Washington on Wednesday. God knows what happens from there. NBC's Ben Collins, whose reporting has been indispensable on all this stuff. You can read it at NBCnews.com. Ben, thanks so much. Mika?
Well, by the way, yesterday in our coverage of some of the Republicans' plans to object to the Electoral College votes, we pointed out some context and history that the last 3 times a Republican has been elected president, Democrats in the House brought objections to the electoral votes in states the Republican nominee won. We gave several examples of congressional Democrats who praised then Senator Barbara Boxer, who in 2005 objected to President George W. Bush's electoral votes from Ohio. We noted that Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, then a House member, issued a press release praising Boxer's efforts. We should clarify, though, that while Van Hollen commended Boxer for raising the issue, he also made clear at the time that, quote, I think it would have been irresponsible to use the certification process to attempt to change that result. Doing so would establish a terrible precedent. In future elections, a majority party in Congress could attempt to overturn the election of a president of the other party. Van Hollen voted against the motion to overturn the election results from Ohio. And still ahead on Morning Joe, it's election.
Let's back up in what that declaration of letter means. Congress could attempt to overthrow the election of a president of the other party. This was written out in 2005. 2005 is whenever I stood back up for the Lord Jesus Christ, and I stood back up for the ministry that I was being led by God, because horrible, horrible, bad things was coming down the pike. If somebody would have told me that all this was escalating over here in America, and I was over in Europe, or I was over in Australia, if I was over in whatever country, even Canada, I would have looked at them and said, you're crazy and you're lying about this, because it would have been an unbelievable tale in what the individual was trying to tell me. But now, since I'm seeing it right in front of my very eyes and I'm understanding it, I'm grasping the validity and how serious that all this is. It's heartbreaking to think that we have come this far as an Americans to basically act not like a bunch of unprofessionals, but act like a bunch of immoral heathens whenever it comes to what our true stance is in the world, and how that people at one time respected us and looked up to us because of the way that we handled our affairs. To think that we are willing to stoop this low in acting this inappropriate absolutely brings tears to my eyes. I am grief-stricken today and so ashamed of how the people that's supposed to represent me are acting in front of the world stage. As Ronald Reagan said, talking about the time capsule, that if it was buried in the White House lawn and dug up 1,000 years from now, he wondered what would the rest of the world think of the Americans. What would they say about our ambitions, about our goals, and about our democracy 1,000 years from now, if it was placed into a time capsule and buried in the White House lawn? From the looks of things, if we're gauging it off of what we're seeing today, I think it would be self-explanatory in what the world would say about the Americans. We would literally be mocked, made fun of, and driven away from the international mic or the international stage. We would be belittled, and we would be embarrassed by the rest of the world, the way that the rest of the world would perceive us from the looks of what we're seeing today. And the bad thing about all this is my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren are seeing the same thing. You got 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds that are grabbing a hold of their mama and papa's coattail and pulling on it right now. And they're saying, or they're asking the question to their own parents, to their loved ones, is this so? Is this the right way of handling all this? Is this the way that we're supposed to be going? And of course, whenever the parents look at it, understanding the history of America, they're bewildered in how to answer their own children, in telling their children, no, this is not normal. No, this is improper. No, this is not good. In other words, they have trouble answering to their own children because of people that's representing us in this abnormal, abstract way. I am so ashamed of what has occurred here, to the degree that sometimes I wish that I wasn't an American. Sometimes I wish that I was from Canada. Sometimes I wish that I was from New Zealand or another country. Because whenever they bring shame upon themselves, it also brings shame upon me and you and our little children. And I know that we know better to get up and tell such futile lies and act in such of an unorthodox way. I know that you know this. I know this. And I'm an uneducated man. I didn't even make it to graduate school. I didn't even graduate. I'm a dropout. And I can see this. And if I can see this and I'm not educated, I know good and well the educated people can see this. What have we done with our dignity to act this way? Because this is not a dignified way that the American people is supposed to be participating in their affairs. What have we done with our pride? Have we thrown it to the side to the point that we don't even think about what other people think about us? Ronald Reagan at least brought that out to the chambers to the point that what would the rest of the world think of the American people 1,000 years from now if we took the events that was happening, put it in a time capsule, and buried it into the ground? What would the rest of the world think of the American people? I remember the speech just like it was yesterday. I remember it very well, the time capsule. Of course, at that point in time, Ronald Reagan was being degraded because he was looking so far into the future pertaining to Star Wars and other events that people was basically sniggering and laughing him, are trying to discredit his qualifications towards what God had given him to give to us. What's more, whenever you're dealing with a group of people that is so narrow-minded, when you're dealing with a group of people that don't care about how other people look at them and how other people conceive them, you're looking at a recipe of catastrophe. And it's not just a catastrophe that's going to happen to them, but it will happen to us. The American people put those people in power to represent us. So whenever the rest of the world mocks and makes fun of them, they're making fun of us. U.S. House of Representatives. That's what that means. That means they're representing we the people. They're representing us. Please, if there's ever been a time that we needed to act decent, professional, proper, and care for each other during a pandemic, this is the time that we need to do so. Under whoever's leadership, by the will of the people, not the will of a crazy man.